Adventure games are not dead.
Okay, I'm on your side, but if I were to go to a publisher right now and pitch an adventure game, they'd laugh in my face.
February 8th, 2017 marks the 5th anniversary of Double Fine's Kickstarter campaign that changed the face of gaming forever. Or did it? During this week, we'll be taking a look at the Kickstarter campaign, the game itself, Two-Player Productions documentary on the development, and the game's impact on the industry over the last 5 years. Double Fine wasn't the first to use Kickstarter, nor were they the first big project. Before them, there was Indie Game the Movie, Kentucky Route Zero, and Octodad Dadliest Catch, but Double Fine was the first major studio to use the crowdfunding platform, any crowdfunding platform, and Tim Schafer the first legendary designer to give it a shot. Their achievement transformed crowdfunding from some unknown indie thing into an industry-changing movement. At the time, it was simply referred to as Double Fine Adventure, but the game would become Broken Age. But it wasn't Double Fine or Tim Schafer alone that made Kickstarter take off. It wasn't just the game they were pitching either. In fact, they weren't pitching a game at all. They were pitching sausage.
You know how they say you don't want to see how sausage gets made? We are going to show you how the sausage gets made. We are going to take our sausage and shove it in your face, warts and all.
Still to this day, Double Fine Adventure remains my favorite Kickstarter campaign, despite all the hate that once surrounded it. Most of that is garbage, but you can be forgiven for thinking the hate towards the campaign is justified. I mean, just look at it. By modern standards, it's atrocious, and nobody would ever get a fraction of what Double Fine received if they just trotted that out today. As always, let's take a look at it from the top. Scrolling past all the updates, as we always have to these days, you'll notice that the campaign is very different from any other we've looked at previously. It starts with a section titled, Welcome to Adventure, which pretty much just talks about Double Fine Studios. The world of video game design is a mysterious one. What really happens behind closed doors of a development studio is often unknown, unappreciated, or misunderstood. And the bigger the studio, the more tightly shut its doors tend to be. With this project, we're taking that door off its hinges and inviting you into the world of Double Fine Productions, the first major studio to fully finance their next game with a Kickstarter campaign and develop it in the public eye. It's odd seeing a Kickstarter page talking about the company before the actual game. Odder still when Double Fine doubles down on that by talking about how they're using Kickstarter. As you probably expect, they talk about how making games is expensive, and how they like to break free from publishers, or at least try to. This was a huge part of their Kickstarter campaign, and something we will doubtlessly come back to in this video and throughout Double Fine Adventure Week. That's what we're calling this week, by the way, because, you know. It's not until near the bottom of the page where Double Fine mentions the game they want to make, and where they drop a massive bombshell. Over a 6 to 8 month period, a small team under Tim Schafer's supervision will develop Double Fine's next game, a classic point-and-click adventure. Where it goes from there will unfold in real time for all backers to see. Two-Player Productions will be documenting the creative process and releasing monthly video updates exclusively to the Kickstarter backers. This documentary series will strive to make the viewer as much a part of the process as possible by showing a game grow from the start to finish with all the passion, humor, and heartbreak that happens along the way. Double Fine is committed to total transparency with this project, ensuring it is one of the most honest depictions of game development ever conceived. Yes, that's right, Double Fine wasn't pitching a game with this Kickstarter, they were pitching a process. Think of it like they were making a documentary that happened to be about making a video game. There are a lot of moving parts here, from Tim Schafer getting back into making an adventure game, to a development studio trying to break away from publishers, to a big studio using crowdfunding for the first time, and so on. But this right here, this often forgotten part of Double Fine Adventure, is what made the campaign so special. We were going to get a look at game development from the moment somebody has the basic idea all the way to the game's release. Back when G4 was producing the show Icons, Schafer and his newly formed studio Double Fine were on the show, documenting the final 2 weeks of production on Psychonauts, the company's first game. Even then, we saw the turmoil that was Psychonauts' development, as the team rushed to squash bugs, spending nearly every night at the office working. Schafer was pretty open and honest about the process, going into detail about how the contract fell through with Microsoft and then trying to find a new publisher. You can tell Schafer really has, or possibly had, a desire to be open and honest about video game development, something that would come back to bite both he and his team a decade later.
Ed Freeze came up and wanted to talk about how Psychonauts was perfect for the Xbox.
Tim Schafer and Ed Freeze work out a publishing deal with Microsoft that will make Psychonauts an Xbox exclusive game. But not everything works out the way they planned. On March 30th, 2004, Microsoft kills the deal.
He told the team, and that's the hardest thing. You know, standing up and telling the team that had happened was kind of, it was hard because the team was doing a really, really good job, and they were all working really, really hard. And they were making an amazing game. So to come and tell that the reward for making that excellent game was that it was canceled.
The unfiltered hatred Double Fine faced from about 2013 up till Broken Age release in 2015 is well documented. Their position has been Double Fine has somehow swindled money from its backers, and that Double Fine's incompetency, particularly from Tim Schafer, has somehow cost those backers money, or something. It's impossible to follow that logic because it's mostly false and inaccurate. The real hatred surrounding this game, this entire process, comes down to two things. The fact that Broken Age took several years longer to make than anyone suspected, and Tim Schafer's outspokenness in regards to Gamergate. Everything from the team deciding to split the game in half to snippets found in the documentary where he uses ammunition against Double Fine, finding its way to the scathing editorials and columns about how Double Fine is clueless and how Kickstarter games always fail. With the benefit of hindsight at least, it's amazing to see the sheer carnage the gaming press and community caused in regards to Broken Age. Schafer absolutely made mistakes, and with this being such a high-profile endeavor and one of the first of its kind, it deserves to be placed under a microscope. But to the degree with which Broken Age, Double Fine, and Kickstarter were torn apart over such non-issues is an embarrassment that we all have to live with now. The biggest sticking point is also another first attempted by Double Fine, a decision shown in the documentary. The developer was spending more money on Broken Age than what they had actually received through the Kickstarter campaign, and began selling their older games on new platforms to cover the cost. When even this money started to dry up, somebody at the company, former COO Justin Bailey, came up with the idea of splitting the game in two and selling the first half to cover the cost of the second. After much debate, Schafer decided to go with this as not to have to cut anything from the final game. Unfortunately for them, when the gaming community heard the news, it was like a nuclear bomb had detonated. Double Fine isn't totally innocent here, as they chose to only release this news to backers, but the news inevitably got out, and without proper context, the gaming press had no choice but to assume the worst. Soon, the situation went from Double Fine splitting the game in half so they wouldn't have to make any cuts to the game, to a manufactured story of Double Fine scamming backers, forcing backers to buy the first half because they're almost out of money and on the verge of financial ruin. The truth was that the first and second half would be free to backers, and if any non-backers bought the first half, they would get the second half for free. Double Fine didn't help themselves when they lashed out at the media for publishing early reviews. Backers were given the first half of the game 2 weeks before it would go on sale to the general public, but some game journalists backed the project as well, and so Double Fine put a review embargo on the game, not allowing anyone to write a review until the general release. This embargo, however, was of course ignored, and as shown in the documentary and interviews later, Double Fine was not happy about it. To be fair, this was a no-win situation. In the documentary, we see the aftermath of what happened, as Bailey explains that all the reviews came out before the general release, leaving nobody talking about the game 2 weeks later, thus costing them sales. Now, obviously, Double Fine should have put the game up for sale at the same time as they sent it out to backers, but for whatever reason, they chose not to, and this was taken as a sign of Double Fine hiding and withholding information. By the time the second half was released, all talk involving the company had died down. As Schafer mentions in the documentary, nobody really seemed to care anymore now that the game was out. In fact, he seemed pretty bitter about it all, about how no one apologized for calling Double Fine scammers or how they were doomed to fail. You have to sympathize with him. I know I do, because he's got a point. Everybody was quick to call the game a failure, to say that Kickstarter games would never work and how Double Fine totally blew it. But Double Fine did deliver on everything they promised, it just took a little longer than anticipated, but nobody cared. He's right, nobody apologized. Nobody said, oh, I guess Kickstarter and Double Fine aren't so bad after all. A lot of mistakes were made by Double Fine, by the media, by the community, and instead of working to improve them, everybody, Double Fine included, more or less walked away, leaving behind scar tissue that persists to this day.
If you've ever been told that you're part of a niche market, if you've ever when you were a kid and you had your favorite TV show canceled, or you hear about your favorite band being dropped by their label for not selling enough, and you've just been like, why does a big company get to choose what music I listen to, or what movies I watch, or what TV shows I watch, or what game I get to play? Now you know that they can't do that anymore. You can choose. So thanks everybody very much.
Depending on who you ask, 5 years is either a brief moment or an eternity. The gaming industry is a fast-changing creature. Casting a look back at the state of the industry in 2012 renders a feeling of great progress and change. Everything from business to production is handled so differently now that it's like we're in an alien world. For the average consumer, this last half-decade has been short. We reap the benefits and fear for the obstructions of these changes, all while debating what's best moving forward. But for the game developers, Double Fine in particular in this case, those 5 years may as well have been 5 centuries. Let's look back. It's January 2012 and you have a prototype for a video game. You usually deal with self-doubt, as many creatives do, but this is it. You've got something you know is truly special. Maybe it won't set the world on fire, it probably won't, but you think it can turn out into a full game and do pretty well. At least well enough that you can get more cash for it for your next game and get your foot in the door of the game industry. But there's a problem. You need a lot of money that you just don't have to finish the game. You pitched this prototype around to publishers, but nobody was interested, or maybe they just wanted too much creative control or too many royalties. Back then, your only options were to try and finish the game with no money at all, work a day job for potentially years to save up enough money, toiling away on the game whenever you had spare time, or just give up. Maybe that's a bit of a simplistic representation, but the structure of it is sound. Creating a video game is unlike any other form of creative entertainment. You can write a book, shoot a movie, or even make music, and there's a strong chance you'll be able to find a financial backer or just self-publish it. But video games? If you don't have a big name or a big success already under your belt, the chances of you getting financed are slim to none. Following Double Fine, it seemed like everyone was jumping on the Kickstarter bandwagon, mostly to revive dead games and genres like Brian Fargo's Wasteland 2, Shadowrun Returned, and Leisure Suit Larry Reloaded. But there were other games on Kickstarter at this time too that would go on to be huge, like FTL Faster Than Light, The Banner Saga, and Thomas Was Alone. At the same time, it's impossible to say that Double Fine is the only reason Kickstarter ever became famous. Before Tim Schafer and friends launched DFA, there were already games that would prove to be heavy hitters using the site, such as Octodad Deadliest Catch, Resonance, and Kentucky Route Zero. Double Fine can't even be credited with making crowdfunding itself popular, as angry video game nerd creator James Rolfe used Indiegogo some months prior to fund Angry Video Game Nerd the movie. You could even argue that Double Fine weren't technically the first to document the game development process thanks to that Minecraft documentary. You could easily argue that Double Fine mishandled a lot of the process and that they deserved at least some of the backlash. So where does that leave Double Fine? What space does this Kickstarter campaign and the ensuing game and documentary occupy? There will never be a definitive answer to that question. We're all going to have to come up with our own answers and our own justifications. Many of us probably already have. I don't think it's ludicrous to suggest that Double Fine was a pioneer. They had went where not many had gone before and found success that nobody really had found before. They were the first major gaming studio to use Kickstarter to revitalize what they felt was a genre of gaming that didn't get enough respect, and they showed what it was like from beginning to end. They also showed that crowdfunding was a viable option for game developers, and they made a pretty decent game too. That's gotta mean something, right?